And Chair Burt, we are now good to go. Yes.
All right. Good morning. At this time, I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Palo Alto City School Liaison Committee for June 17th, 2021. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, of course. Chair Burt,
Here.
Board President Darab,
Here.
Board Member DiBrienza,
Here.
Council Member Tanaka.
Here.
4 present.
Thank you. So at this time, we have an opportunity for the public to speak on any item that is not on the agenda. Do we have any speakers who would like to talk?
Yes, if anyone would like to speak on oral communications, please raise your hand in the Zoom app or press *9. And Chair Burt, we have no public speakers.
Thank you. So we'll move on to item number 2, which is approval of the minutes from May 20th, 2021. And do we have a motion to approve?
And,
I'll move to approve.
Yes, before that, I do want to do a soft reminder of public comment as well for this item.
Okay. So we can take the motion. So a second?
I'll second.
Board Member DiBrienza. And then do we have any public comment on the minutes?
Yes, if anyone would like to speak on the approval of the minutes, please raise your hand in the Zoom app or press *9. And Chair Burt, we have no speakers.
Great. So then approval of minutes, Board Member DiBrienza,
Yes.
Councilmember Tanaka,
Yes.
Board President Darab,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So we've taken care of that complicated business. Okay, we get to move on to the updates. First, Superintendent Austin, would you like to wade in first?
Sure. Our update is we're out. So we held our successful graduations. They were really beautiful events. As we looked around, they were the first large events most of us had been to in any amount of time. So we felt great about that. We had the largest summer school in the history of the district going on right now, 3,000 students. That'll be in the Mercury News. She told me yesterday that might be second only to San Francisco. And I reminded her that that's on top of us being the first district open in the region. So on top of that, we have this robust summer program, pretty exciting. We are, just like everyone else, trying to wade through the changing rules for masking and vaccination verifications and what that may mean in the fall. We're doing the best we can to interpret those rules, and we actually held our kickoff meeting with our admin team. So about 55 of us got together last week to really think about our goals moving forward. The one goal I'd like to touch on, because I think there's a natural connection with the city. Coming off the pandemic, when so many people were more aware of their own needs and concerns and fears, we think it's really important that we get back to service to others. So one of our 5 goals will be service to others next year. And meeting with Ed and Chantal, we talked about that a little bit. I think that there are some opportunities there for the city and for the school district to have some coordination of efforts. But I think it's really important that we get back to not only doing our jobs and getting back with students in some format that looks much more like it did 2 or 3 years ago, but it's really a time for us to rethink a lot of things. And one could be the concept of being bigger than ourselves. Like we joked around a little bit. There's lots of anger and frustration and people who want certainty. But if you're able to volunteer at Pets in Need, every pet's going to love you and be thankful that you're there. And we think maybe we just need to find more of those opportunities to think about something other than ourselves and our own situation. So out of the 5 goals that we have, that's the one that I think is the most prime for a partnership or coordinated effort, not unlike the 21-day equity challenge that we did in partnership with the city. So that's it for me.
Thank you. And can you just give a little more depth on this expanded summer school program? My understanding is that it's moved beyond what were the more traditional enrichment curriculum to including kind of remedial in ways to help kids who might have fallen behind during the pandemic and things like that. Is that
Yeah.
part of what's going on?
Yeah, so we had about 1,600 high school students are doing some form of remediation, credit recovery. We've allowed that to double this year. In the past, you could take 1 class, now you can remediate up to 2. And there's also some opportunities for advancement. And some students are able to take some classes to clear up space that can allow a little lighter load next year. 400 middle school students and 600 elementary. We have mental health services at the high school. The middle schools are pure enrichment. And all low income and struggling students at the elementary schools were not only eligible, they all received personal invitations to come back over the summer to really try to get a jump start. For this year, that was an investment of about $2 million. It's about triple the expense and the participation rate of previous summer schools. And we'll see how it goes. I mean, it's off to a great start. We'll see if this is something that sticks and just becomes common practice, or if this was a one-off. We don't know yet. We'll see.
Great, thank you. And City Manager Shikata.
Actually, I have a quick
sorry.
question.
Please.
Do you know what's driving the large attendance of summer school?
Yeah, partially recruitment. Again, we asked people to come back. Our DF reports, meaning students who earn Ds and Fs, will show a couple things. Overall, a decline in Ds and Fs, but for the students that earned them, they earned more of them per student than in the past. So, just doing a little guesswork, the students that were negatively impacted or really struggled during the closures struggled more than their peers. And so a student before that may have struggled and got a D or an F in one, more likely failed 2 or 3 during this time. So that drove some of our remediation numbers, something we very much want to keep an eye on. In fact, we've created, this will be on our next board meeting Tuesday, an entire division now. It's going to be led by Lana Conaway, our Assistant Superintendent of Equity and Student Affairs. It's going to have our brand new Director of Student Success and Supports, Guillermo Lopez. And then underneath that is going to have a whole division of mental health and support systems. That's going to be done nothing but targeting students who are either struggling with mental health or academics. And it's going to be a straight line to get them those support systems.
Great, thank you.
All right, I'll jump in. All right, thank you, Chair. Let's see, my apologies for being a little late. We do a normal Thursday morning standing meeting with our department heads, just check in. And today, probably more so than most, just a lot of activities ongoing, and particular, just as I'm sure with the district and all employers tracking Cal OSHA meeting today and effect that will have on workplace rules. So that said, let me just run through a few things. First off, along the summer school, I'll mention summer camps are off and running, and Kristen's here. We can touch on it a bit later as well, but really great to see that running forward. I think both in virtual as well as in person. versions, iterations this summer. So look forward to hearing more as that gets off the ground. Want to just note a few things that have happened over the last week or so, but before I lose it, note that today just received notice about our utilities. We'll be sending notifications to customers of the potential for rolling blackouts. The California Independent System Operators notified us it's a flex alert day because of the heat, largely in the inland areas and East Bay and the like. So given that, we'll be doing notifications with the potential for 1 hour blocks of blackouts to occur if necessary. So 'tis the season and we're just getting started. So we're certainly hoping that that won't be necessary, but we do want to provide heads up for folks. And then let's see, in terms of things and implications of that also with the heat, our libraries, in particular Mitchell Park and Rinconada, will be open this afternoon, evening. And so while not officially cooling centers, because as you may have noticed, cooling centers have a special designation under the public health order that require masking. But they're, as libraries, they are libraries. And so they are open with our regular rules. And let's see, so just to hit a few things that have been happening. For those who've been on Highway 101, you will notice there is now a complete structure going over the freeway. Yes, very proud of our staff working with CHP and Caltrans to arrange for the full freeway closure to get that last segment in place. We're still at least a couple of months of work to be done before it's complete and open to the public, but stand by to get an invitation to the ribbon cutting, as I'm sure students and the entire community looking forward to having that new facility available. Also, just as noting recent events are this past weekend, Palo Alto Summit for Women and Girls, and on women and girls, but also for everyone, was a really nice event, and appreciate everyone's participation in that, and our notable next step in a conversation that we'll be continuing. Let's see, just a couple other things in terms of ongoing programs with the superintendents mentioning mental health. We last night had our latest of our monthly Wellness Wednesday programs. Last night focusing on Avenidas and highlighting their programs for senior wellness. And so we're going to continue that on a monthly basis. We've done mindfulness and teen programs. And so we'll continue that going forward. And I think that's probably good for the time being. Thanks.
Great. And excuse me, do board members have some additional updates on board activities?
I'm guessing you might, Shanik, more than I do.
Well, I think Dr. Austin pretty much covered it. I mean, as we wrap up to the end of the year, we're now focusing more on, construction and budget. Pedagogy stuff is, we focus a lot during the school year. We had a lot of construction items on the last agenda, bond funded, and this next agenda, we're going to be discussing the budget. So it's getting to the sort of, the higher level administrative, sort of the running of the district. Our budget is fine. It's not, nobody is in a great, amazing place, but I think we've been fortunate in terms of increased revenue. We've had increased expenditures too because of COVID, and but we're taking the opportunity, I think, to do some really important sort of systemic work, including things like books and other construction that's not in the bond, or we talked some about some of this last few times. So that's just on a high level, but we're in a good place, and I think that's going to really have impacts on our students over the next year or two, especially as we focus on transitioning students back to full in-person learning. The mental health aspect is going to be so important. We've talked about that. We're talking about it again at the next meeting. As Don mentioned, getting students back in classrooms is not just flicking a switch after a year of being at home. And we were talking before the meeting, not seeing people face to face, even when you're in person, there is going to be a lot of adjustment, especially for the younger kids. So there is a lot of effort going in and resources going into mental health and wellness.
Great, thanks. So I guess from the city side, there's a number of things I'd like to share. As we mentioned previously, we've been going through our budget struggles. We just on Tuesday, we finalized adoption of the budget, but basically the decisions have been made. We had scheduled an additional $6 million in cuts to services on top of 37 million reduction in service budget last year. Not all of that were actual cuts, but much of it was. And through a combination of slightly improved revenues and from the federal government and our own local revenues, we were able to restore that 6 million and basically not have deeper cuts this year, but we weren't able to make any progress on restoring the big cuts from last year. So as we're reopening, we're half reopening basically in a lot of our services. Our children's library will be open at half its former level. The children's theater in a similar circumstance. The Mitchell Library will be essentially restored to full service as we staff back up. One of our challenges is that we actually had to lose staff either through attrition or layoffs last year. And so we're rehiring to meet. We can authorize reopening and we don't necessarily immediately have the ability to flip the switch and accomplish that. So that's over several months that we'll be even doing those measures. Things like our shuttle, it's zeroed out. We don't, when fall classes return, there's no city shuttle any longer. The Arts Center is had significant cuts. Even public safety and fire and police services remain reduced. We have a brownout part-time at one of our stations. We did get a really valuable deal with the county and the Los Altos Fire District to fund full coverage at the Foothills Park Fire Station. And it's going from having only been on high fire risk days to full-time coverage there. So that's a big benefit for reducing what is an acute fire risk and something that we're trying to address more. But even in that, we have a Foothills Fire Protection Plan, but even that has had its own struggles in being able to achieve all of its objectives because of funding, while the risk has accelerated. Not only the mega fires that we've had in recent years that last year came to threatening us, but this year, as we all know, a record drought. So we have a lot of real challenges going forward, and one of the things is that we still have a structural deficit even without restoring those programs. And part of that will be dependent on the degree of economic recovery and those assumptions over the next 5 years. And then the business tax that we've been discussing for several years, the Finance Committee just last night or 2 nights ago moved a next step on that. And that's likely to be going forward on the November 2022 ballot. But previously, the discussion was dedicating those funds toward transportation, both operations, expanding things like the shuttle and things, and capital of the grade separations and capital projects of affordable housing. Now we will have to struggle between those projects and restoration of services using those dollars, and that's not resolved how we would utilize those dollars. I will say that with what Superintendent Austin was talking about on services to others, we were able to restore what was a prospective cut to the Youth Connectedness Initiative, which is funded by the county and the city as a program through YCS. And that's very much aligned with what you were describing of its peer-to-peer connectedness and service. And so that's one thing that a relatively small item, but it struck me as being aligned with the initiative you were just talking about. So that's additional update on where we stand. And Councilmember Tanaka, did you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
I thought you were pretty comprehensive. I actually did have a question for my school board colleagues though.
Fire away.
So I was just curious. There was I know that on the state level, there's like a 2021 revision of the math frameworks, and let's see. I'm trying to find the official name. I was trying to look for it, but I heard a bit about it, and I guess it was trying to do more equitable math instruction. Do you guys know much about that? And I was just wondering what is the schools districts like direction in that on that topic? Do you guys know? Or do you guys know what I'm talking about? I'm trying to find the exact keyword on it, but I forgot the.
There's not too much to say about this one, I think, at this point. I don't think we have a position on it. Certainly, the board hasn't taken it up in any way. I think you're right in how you're talking about it. The state is looking at redoing the math framework.
Yeah.
And they are working with math educators to decide if there should be a mandate as to the best path when kids should be laned, and if it start earlier or should it start later. And so they're in talks now in the state and at the State Board of Ed, and at some point there'll probably be a new framework that comes down, and I don't know if it'll look very different or it'll just look a little bit different.
Okay, so there's nothing that the school board has done anything on this topic yet. Okay,
We're just kind of waiting to see how that goes. Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay, thank you.
And I guess at this time then, we should open it to the public to see if any members want to speak on this item, which is the updates.
Yes, if any members of the public would like to speak on item 3, please raise your hand in the Zoom app or press *9. And Chair Burt, we have no public speakers.
Okay, thank you. So then our next item is on student emotional and mental health support services. And I think this is really, in some ways, it ties into the following item, the updates that the district provided on the range of initiatives that you have related to those areas. So I don't know, is that Superintendent Austin or who would like to take the lead on this?
Sure. First, Danny, can you do me a favor? I've got Yolanda Conaway. Lana is in this meeting as a participant. Can we promote her so that she can give us the overview of our program, please?
Yes, of course. I've just promoted her.
It's that easy, Lana. That's how we do motions here.
Danny's magic.
Lana is our Assistant Superintendent of Equity and Student Affairs. And as I mentioned earlier, she's going to be the lead in this area. In our new reporting structure, Lana reports directly to me because this work is just too important to have any additional layers. And I've asked her just to give a 2 or 3 minutes overview, and then we can take questions. But clearly we know as we return, we're not going to address teaching and learning until we make sure everyone's okay. So this is a big push for us. And Lana, why don't you go ahead and take it from here, and we'll see if there are questions after your overview.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dr. Austin. So obviously the pandemic has created a situation where we're really paying attention to mental health. So part of this, the start was started with the superintendent's vision around a focus area. So what we did after that was to try to restructure our department so that we can best meet the needs as students are returning. But we're not just focusing on students, we're looking at the mental health needs of our staff as well. So the restructure involves including a district level mental health specialist. And we have selected one of our top specialists that have already had a lot of experience in our district and is working in our wellness center right now. And that information will be coming out very soon at our next board meeting. But the focus of that particular role is to really identify areas and gaps that we need to fill in terms of meeting the needs of our students and our staff. But we're also looking at initiatives around parent education to support our families as well. So as we build this out, we're looking currently at the practices in our wellness centers and whether it's identifying soon enough and whether our students are actually accessing that particular service, but also destigmatizing, the whole idea of seeking out mental health supports, which has been one of the biggest challenges with our teenagers. As we move forward, we're hoping to create some structures where it's a little bit easier for them to access, and also creating this, kind of this culture and this climate around mental health supports that it's part of our structure. So I think we're moving in the right direction. We have the right people in place. So our objective is to strengthen our wellness centers, some of the supports that we currently have. And we're also looking at how do we entrench the mental health supports in our system. Right now we're using contracted services. So some of this work is going to be around how do we embed that structure in our organizational structure so that it becomes part of what we do. So moving forward, some of the things that we're going to be focused on is not just mental health. We know it's connected to our physical health as well. So we have just promoted a coordinator of health services who's going to be looking at some avenues for our staff to engage in to both improve fitness and health as well as mental health. So those two things kind of dovetail with each other as we move forward. There's also talks about how do we expand our reach to our middle schools and how do we greater support our elementary level students. So you will see some really creative ideas coming across the board just for us to kind of unpack and figure out what works best for the district. And the other piece of that is to make sure that we really have our finger on the pulse of the extent of need of our students. So it's going to be important for us to survey students and do regular wellness check-ins to just get an idea of where kids are returning. But we want to do the same for our staff as well to make sure that we are we know what issues they're dealing with and what kinds of support they need. So I'm looking forward to kind of expanding the conversation. The lead that we have that's going to be overseeing some of this work has already started to reach out to other school sites to talk about what's happening with mental health and where do you see the gaps happening. She's already had conversations with the outgoing team of Green Middle School, and we hope to expand that conversation so that everyone's talking about mental health and every administrator and every leader in every building is focused on identifying what those needs are so that we can better respond. Does that kind of sum it up for it, Don? Did I hit all the pieces?
You sure did, Lana. I gave Lana so much preparation time. Okay, not much, but
not any.
not any. But Lana's going to take the lead on this. I think like everybody else, checking in and surveying and trying to get services to and you heard her say it, not only the students, but the adults who need the help. And when we look at the partnerships piece a little bit later, it's really mental health focused. Things like Care Solace can be accessed by the entire community. You don't have to have a child in the district. If you live here, you can access it. And it's important work. Yeah. Coming back. I'll tell you this, we're doing face-to-face evaluation meetings with all of our principals. And I've really been struck by what a toll the year took on them, because they pushed through like champs and they dealt with everything. But now that they're able to come in and honestly share what the year did to them, it was brutal. And that's probably true of a lot of professions, but I'm not in charge of a lot of professions. I'm in charge of ours, and we need to make sure people are okay.
Yeah. And Don, if I may add, I don't know if you all got an opportunity to read the most recent research that Ed Week reported around the groups that had the highest levels of stress and anxiety as a result of the pandemic. It showed up that it was teachers. So teachers reported some really significant anxiety and stress around shifting from, a mode of learning that they've been used to shifting to remote learning, and having to do that quickly, but not only that, to shift back. So as they're dealing with their own family issues. So the anxiety and stress rates are high. We recognize it, we know it, and we're going to do our best to respond to the needs of our school community as we move forward.
Great, thank you. And maybe at this time we can just see if there are any members of the public who want to speak to this item. Before we go
Yes,
on.
of course. If anyone would like to speak on item 4, please raise your hand in the Zoom app or press *9. And we have no public speakers, Chair Burt.
Great. So colleagues, any additional questions or comments on this update? Board Member DiBrienza.
Thanks. I don't have any questions. I just wanted to, I guess, just thank Don and Lana and everyone that's been working on mental health this year. It's not like everyone's in a great place, but given the hard year that it's been, there's just been a lot of attention paid to this and a lot of investment. And as Dr. Austin said, like CareSolace is accessible to anybody in town. And I've spoken with a few people who've told me they've accessed it, and not through our district, just in general. And the attention to coming back in the fall and not just hitting the ground running with academics, but really getting kids on campus and getting, half of Pally and Gun, half of those grades, 9th and 10th, have either never been on campus or only been on campus a few times behind a mask. So we've really got a very different situation than we usually have. And so I'm really grateful for the attention and investment we're putting into this. Thank you.
Yeah, it's it just strikes me that for our youth and teachers, this has been 15 months of an unprecedented disruption, and for the youth, that's a big part of their school years, and as we come out of this, we have the dual challenges of how do we triage from the stresses that have occurred over the last 15 months, and how do we quickly kind of reestablish an underlying well-being and health, and make sure that we're returning as much of a sense of normalcy as quickly as possible, and recognizing that there's even catch up, not only the great stuff you're doing with summer school, but just all the things that the kids were deprived of. I ride past the Pally football field, and the seeing just these massive flag football camps just as one manifestation. I don't think I've ever seen so many kids out, and it just seems like, and that's hardly the entire breadth of this kind of thing, but it just seems like there's this huge pent up demand for a lot of those things that just bring joy and well-being to youth. So this is going to be something that will, not only your initiatives are so important on, but that hopefully we can work together to try to help on. So I guess that's all that I had, unless anybody else had any thoughts. In that case, we can move on to our next item, which is the city and school collaboration. And thank you to the district for providing, we got last night, I think, a update that has in red on a PDF, and maybe we can even do a screen share would be helpful. If someone could do that, of maybe Chantel, I don't know if you might be able to manage that. So that as the district walks through the additions that they did to this outline, we can just see them all in front of us. So I don't know who would like to take the lead on that. On the Superintendent Austin, yes.
Yeah, and start, and I'm going to hand off to Lana because that's what I do best. Lana makes me look better.
Thank you.
I will tell you this, I'm looking out my window right now and I can see the new overpass and it is pretty awesome. It was fun to watch coming in. So just as a side note, thank you to the city. That turned out beautiful. I can't wait for that thing to be open, but that was fun watching it roll down the freeway.
And I'm sorry, did you see that there's a YouTube video that I think the Mercury put up of time lapse of the construction, and it's fun to watch. I kept worrying that they were at some point in time they were going to drop it.
Yeah. You better not drop that thing.
Yeah.
Looks pretty awesome though. Yeah. So we really focus on the mental health piece because it seemed like the most timely for the partnerships piece. And I'll have Lana, who I believe is still on. Yes, she is. I'm going to have her just walk through a couple of those, and a couple of these we've referenced a couple of times. So Lana, maybe if you can spend an extra minute or so on Care Solace, exactly what it is, because that is probably the most visible. You can go ahead and walk us through our additions.
Okay, great. So Care Solace, we've mentioned it before, but I don't even know if most folks know how simple and intuitive it is for any individual to get on and figure out what types of resources best fit their needs. So as we are pushing out various resources to families and students when they come to us directly, Care Solace allows families to take some leadership in finding the specific care that they need with some support from the staff. So the great thing about this, though, is that no matter what language a family speaks or any language barrier that's there's a live concierge support system there for you. So that individual is able to work as kind of a liaison between both the family, the student, and the school to link students to service. So this has been really instrumental. And I have to tell you, like when I start to look at the numbers of individuals actually accessing the database, it's very encouraging to see, which makes me, believe that the easier we can make access, the more folks will be engaged in actually seeking out the care. So this, the individual that the family is linked to on the Care Solace side helps them through the process. And if there is a situation where a family gets or a student gets linked to one that's not appropriate, that service will also provide some support in linking the individual to another mental health provider or mental health program. So I think it's a great way. Some of our very own staff who are in the wellness center actually, make sure that they understand what those supports are as well, so they can make recommendations going out to the family or the student in need to just say, we've worked with this one. Here are a few options for you to consider, but ultimately is completely up to the individual which program or which service they select. So it puts some ownership and some agency in the hands of the individual, but it also provides step-by-step follow-up for the individual. So that referral can come from our staff initially. That concierge person follows back up with the staff to make sure that we know that actual connection has occurred, so that we can then follow up if there's some issues with the family or the student getting connected. So it has been extremely useful, I think, for most families. What we do need to do, though, and this is kind of our next step, is to figure out what's the nature and the satisfaction of that service once the connection is made. So I think there's some additional steps for us to tie up, particularly as it relates to our student support services. So Care Solace will continue to be a part of our platform, for as long as we can have it. But it has made the process much easier, I think, for our families and staff who are accessing it. Any questions about that before I move on to our wellness centers? Okay. So the next one, and this is the piece that we're most proud of because a lot of work has gone into our wellness centers. They're drop-in wellness centers right now. Now that we have someone at the district office that's really going to be paying attention to our wellness centers, we're going to be looking for efficiency and efficacy as our students go through that process. So right now, what we're hoping to analyze is what percentage of students are actually accessing the wellness centers just to get a break from the classroom setting, and which students actually need a higher level of care and may not be reaching that level of care just by the pop-in because the level of connections aren't made. So the individual that we're hoping to tap to look at this will be making site visits at our wellness centers, looking at how those wellness centers are running, looking at the types of concerns kids are coming in with. We do have some early data that suggests that there's a high level of anxiety and stress related to school. And much of that is around the rigor of the coursework and kind of stress that students sometimes put on themselves in terms of meeting the expectations of the classroom. So part of our work is going to be to really dig deeply to figure out what the core causes of some of the anxiety and stress is, and figure out a way to structure those wellness centers so that it's tapping into the greatest needs that we're identifying while still providing the support for those kids who just need a break from the classroom. As you can imagine, we still have those students who say, I just need to, I'm not really wanting to do this right now, I need a break. So having students use the wellness centers for the right reasons is going to be a critical choice, but also making sure that we're putting the choice and the agency on the student to identify whether they need that support or not. So it's not our call to say, you're just trying to get out of class, but we're going to err on the side of the student and then monitor data to determine whether a particular student is accessing the wellness centers for the appropriate reasons. So moving forward, I think we will do a much better job in the actual options offered in the wellness center and how it's structured to make sure that it's running as effectively and efficient as it can. Also, a proud piece is our telehealth services, and I got to tell you, it's one advantage of COVID was that we had to be really creative about how we were providing services. So, the wellness staff was, right on it the minute we started to see things shifting and going to school closures and remote learning. There was a concerted effort to identify ways for students to continue to access care. The advantage for us now is that even though kids may not necessarily be at home or learning at home, we still have a platform that students can access at any time that they need it. So the drop-in services that our wellness individuals provide is, you log on to this and you can pop into, a group or a chat with the mental health worker and get some support right on the bat. So if a student is at home and maybe in crisis, there's an opportunity for that student to call in and access care. And it's also a very quick way for the wellness staff to be able to identify a student who may be in immediate crisis that may need some support, even if they're not directly on campus. So we will be looking at the telehealth services to identify ways that we can reach more students because we're in the digital age and there are some students who may be more likely to access that particular service than actually leave a classroom and go to the wellness center. So we're hoping to strengthen that support as well. And obviously our partnerships with other agencies has been instrumental in our response to mental health and wellness. Most of you have probably heard of Aki. They provide some of the most high quality parent ed and group and family therapy that I've seen. Everyone that has ever gone to any of their sessions has only given me positive feedback on what they offer. So super high quality. We're hoping to strengthen that partnership through the district level mental health provider so that we can really identify what those needs are and tailor the Asian American Community Involvement Group so that they're addressing the needs as we see them crop up this school year as we reopen. And then our age-old Cassie and Family and Children Services. All of these folks are opportunities to partner. What you don't see here is Stanford, which is another group that we partner with, and we're hoping to strengthen that partnership as well, because we feel like we can get a lot more out of our Stanford partnership than we're currently doing, and perhaps shifting the focus of that partnership to figure out how we can better support our staff. So we are continuing to analyze both cost versus the services that we're getting, so that we are being both fiscally responsible, as well as providing high quality mental health supports and services for our students. So that's it for me for the mental health section.
You're muted.
I'm muted?
No,
Oh, I'm still
Pat.
muted. Sorry, I thought I
Oh.
had muted myself.
Oh.
Yeah, and then I see that you also had additions under the recreation. I don't know if anyone would want to just elaborate a little bit on that.
I will. So 2 years ago, we entered into a partnership with In Play. We're hoping to really hone in and push this out to our community at an even greater level, because I think just the communication has not been as consistent and persistent as we have been around Care Solace. But In Play is very much like Care Solace, except the service they offer is around free, reduced cost, and at cost, kind of summer and after school programs for students. So our objective, closely linked to mental health, is the engagement of students in activities rather than just sitting at home on the couch, or online somewhere on social media. This allows parents to go on and actually look for high quality recreational services for students, identify whether they are, able to pay for those services, and then specifically say, I'm looking for a no cost support for my child, and be able to get hands-on, right, all in one spot, everything that's happening across Palo Alto, to figure out where their child can seek, just kind of recreational support. So that's anywhere from crafts to sports to just about anything you can imagine that for kids to engage in. It's a great opportunity to continue learning over the summer for those students who didn't sign up for summer school. And it also relieves some of the burden from families of doing all the research to try to find something for their kids over the summer or after school. So it also includes after school care. And it's a really, really great resource. It is tailored. It is actually a PAUSD site linked to In Play. So parents can go on, hear a little bit about PAUSD's mission, and then just do a search on specifically what they need to try to support whatever summer service that they need, or after school service that they need. So we're hoping that families will continue to take advantage of this. We do see lots of movement in play, but we hope to just continue to market it so our families know that resource is available. This, along with some of our other resources, are included on our webpage. If you haven't checked out our resource page, which we update on a regular basis, it includes tons of stuff for families, whether it's parent ed or specific supports and services for students. So we're excited about that partnership as well, which originally started with Santa Clara County, who picked up most of the cost. And I have to say the cost was minimal, not even enough to speak of for us. But the impact that it could potentially have on our families was quite huge. So we're pretty happy to have that support.
And, yes, and finally the right at school, I guess.
Yeah, this is actually another really proud moment for us, because we've been fortunate enough to have worked with the Palo Alto Community Child Care contract to get some support for our students. When we started to look at the numbers, I'm going to be honest, the number of our low-income students served by PAC, it was important for us to figure out a way where we can expand that support and service, so that, particularly during COVID, that both our families and our teachers had access to high-quality childcare. We partnered with Right at School right away. They came in and set up their centers. This is another agency that we've had nothing but positive reviews on. Their cost structure makes sense to us. And quite frankly, our educators can get childcare for 50% off. Some of the lowest rates you've seen, whether the family is a low income family or not. But they're cost efficient, they're high quality, and they also support. This is a great thing about Right at School. They also support the student academics as well. So while students are there, they are making sure that students are logging on, and staying on track with their courses. So they did this throughout the pandemic during school closures, and they are also making quite generous offers, I would say, related to supporting our staff and our families as we move forward. So there are some things that they're doing for us right now during summer school, and we're analyzing and looking now to see, what that may potentially look like during the fall semester. So we're lucky to have this group. We have a site lead of Right at School that's probably here more often than her staff, and I don't even think she lives in the area, but she wants to make sure the program is running well, and she calls us our, kind of our top client, in this area. So we get lots of attention from this group, lots of concierge service and support from them, and we feel like we're providing a really high quality of service to our students and families as well.
Oh, great. And I see the last item is a school site emergency plans.
Yeah, so every safety is a huge priority in Palo Alto, of course, and then that eye on safety had to shift somewhat as we kind of went into the COVID area. Our school site emergency plans have always been in place. We have a safety person now who's on top of looking at specifically those plans and making sure that they're shored up and solid. But we also, in addition to those emergency plans, also every school site had to have like a COVID, response plan, which has been vetted through our safety coordinator. So we are, simultaneously we're looking at, our campus safety, but we also now moving into the fall have to really spend some attention, even though COVID rates are going down and we're starting to get back to normal. It's not over yet. So, part of our safety approach is going to be to continue to monitor that, which brings in part of our strategy around testing and the situation where we may need to increase testing or reduce testing depending on where we are. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that every site is attuned to, our basic emergency practices, but we're also looking at our COVID emergency practices that are going to continue throughout next year.
Great, thank you. And I don't think we've given an opportunity for public comment yet on this item. Is that correct, Downey?
Yes. If anyone from the public would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand in the Zoom app or press *9. And Chair Burt, we have no public speakers.
Okay, thank you. And so other committee members, any additional comments or questions on either what was presented or kind of the package as a whole here? I've got some thoughts that I want to share after you folks have had a chance to wade in. Not seeing any. As I was looking at your additions to all especially the great focus on the mental health initiatives, I realized a couple areas that we hadn't included. We have next Friday the opening of the Teen Mental Health Center alcove that is county funded on Middlefield Road, which is really a great commitment by the county toward our community and the teen needs. And what that reinforced to me was, we were having this list, trying to put together the various programs that our two bodies had, but we really have other partners of the county. Another example of the partnership that the three of us have is not only the alcove, but the teacher housing, which we didn't include in our list as a collaboration. And then the references that the district made to increase collaborations with Stanford, certainly with their School of Education, that the district has had different collaborations over the years, but the city does as well. And as Stanford campus is part of your district, but not within our jurisdiction, although you may not know that we have with the whole general use permit, there is actually a whole recognition of a tri-party agreement that has existed for 30 plus years that obligates Stanford to provide for, not necessarily directly provide, all municipal type services. And the county is right now, this was triggered during the GUP process, and it's continuing even though the GUP is on hold. They have engagement of an analysis to look at Stanford's provision of municipal services and what that means. And I think what's coming out of that is a somewhat broader recognition of municipal type services, and which will likely pull Stanford into a greater role. I mean, Supervisor Samiti had made examples of, well, Stanford doesn't have a children's library and many of the services that the city has. The agreement doesn't obligate them to provide them directly, but provide for them, meaning either they provide them or they in some way help provide them. And that's all a lead up to that. I think that there's on the horizon an opportunity for an even greater engagement with Stanford on some of these things that we're talking about. What that might entail is undetermined at this time, but I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. I also, as I was listening to Yolanda talk about a lot of the programs that the district is doing to help fill the gap for socially and economically disadvantaged students. And that's certainly a lot of that program is related to your voluntary transfer students. We as a city also have a number of collaborations with East Palo Alto and opportunities for more of them going forward. And I think that some of those are recreational. Others have been up until now in public safety with our flood protection and our mutual aid agreements in emergency response. But there are other opportunities, and I think some of those are overlapping that we could collaborate on as well with our neighbors in East Palo Alto. So I wanted to add those three kind of partners to our considerations on this list. How do we leverage resources? How do we just coordinate better in those? And I think those are all good opportunities. And so but now that we have a good list that, maybe we'll fill in some more items as we go, but it's a good foundation. I was struggling with the question of how do we now move forward on putting more meat on the bone and figuring out what we might do with this. And it's kind of hard to do that in a meeting like this. And what I wanted to ask colleagues is, what do you think about maybe we have an ad hoc committee over the summer of maybe one from each of our bodies that would sit down and try to just put more structure to how these items are organized and look for opportunities for collaboration and come back in the fall with maybe a basis for a deeper discussion. So any thoughts on that?
That sounds good.
Okay, good.
One note I just wanted to make just about your last comments, which I agree, thinking about other bodies and how we interact with them, the county, EPA, whatnot, makes sense. And of course, some of our HUR students do live in East Palo Alto. But a rarely known little data point is that somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of all of our HUR students actually live in Palo Alto. So a large majority. So of course, yes, we want to think about how we also connect with East Palo Alto, but the majority of those students for us live in Palo Alto proper.
Well, and that's a really good point. And the district may have a better bead on that than the city does. And how does, this helping the city even more deeply understand that. We have a lot of programs that are deliberately have subsidies for lower income residents and students, but I suspect that the district has a better understanding, at least in terms of students and families, and that is something else that we could benefit from your insights on that. And then one other area that, well, actually two areas I just want to mention. One, as we were hearing about a whole bunch of the programs that you've done virtually and are available on your website. It occurred to me that I don't know how we'll put this in kind of cross marketing or whatever, but we don't, in all likelihood, link on our website to programs that you have that would serve our youth, the youth and families, and people might come, and vice versa. And so even that kind of sharing of information, so that we just said, well, here's what the district does, and here's also how you can find out what the city does. And I think that's another way to leverage resources, and a pretty low cost way to do it. So, and then last one was on the in the school site safety. It occurred to me that another dimension that the district has done really an exceptional job on has been to address the indoor air quality in your buildings. And even as we're coming out of COVID, I believe that this whole program is one that society really needs to do a transformation in indoor air quality beyond COVID, for not just future pathogens, but routine, not pandemic type pathogens, but annual flu and colds and mold, and then the other part being we now have pretty much annual severe air quality impacts, and that the same measures that we've taken to improve the quality of our health and safety of our air for COVID removes particulate contamination for the most part, and really is a drastic improvement for these month or more periods where we have real risk. And the Stanford, for example, is one group, is one of the few that have begun to study the health impacts of the megafires. And I've reached out to some of those study authors and will try to follow up in the coming weeks. But for example, just in the immediate impacts, and this was primarily to people who already had high health risks from air quality. But this last year, I believe they estimated, if I recall correctly, that there were 1,200 fatalities related to the fire impact from the air, far exceeding the direct fatalities from the fires at the point of the emergency. And that doesn't even begin to look at the long-term health impacts. So I think that's another dimension that is going to be important to all of us, and that the efforts you've already done on your schools, I think, have greater benefits than maybe they were immediately recognized. And it's really great what you've done, and the rest of society needs to move in that same direction. So anyone else wish to weigh in? Board Chair Darp.
Yeah, I think it's a fine idea. I think you're right that, if we want to flesh out some more of these joint areas of interest, then, there's no reason to limit it to those discussions to this committee. I mean, the ad hoc, it wouldn't be a decision-making body, but I think we would just tee up ideas for this committee to consider, which I think is a fine use of time.
Great, great. Well, then we can figure out how to who would like to participate and do that as a follow-up to the meeting, and we'll all have 6 weeks or so with a little more spare time than we've had for quite a while. So maybe we can target some projects. I guess that concludes this item, and then the remainder is next to meetings and agendas. Do we want to take a hiatus in July on this this committee meeting?
I think it makes sense to, especially on our end. Staff is going to be on break and then going to be involved in back to school planning, as we hit the ground there. I think it makes sense to take a break. If we have this ad hoc committee, we can, those members can chat over the summer, and then we can pick back up maybe in, I guess, August.
Yeah, and it begs the question too. I don't know what the district's plans are on virtual meetings after the summer break. The city is planning on returning to in-person meetings, but the governor has, for the time being, enabled continuation of virtual meetings. We're planning on moving into some form of a hybrid model to allow remote participation even while we'll have predominantly an in-person meeting. That'll go beg the question of whether this group should meet in person and verify that we're all physically there and we're not avatars or something. And so I guess that'll be a question when we get back together, whether we'll want to do this in person or even required to, because our ability to conduct public meetings remotely was enabled by the emergency orders, and the legislature at the state level has been looking at modifying Brown Act legislation as it pertains to this, but it's not at all clear whether something's going to come out of this legislative session on that.
And just an update, my understanding is the governor's executive order is expected to go through September, I believe was the most recent that we've heard on the executive order that allows us to have virtual meetings. And then the state legislature has not specifically moved forward any other bills to date.
Yeah, and I'll just add that our chief information officer is leading an initiative to do both physical upgrades in our council chambers to help enable this, and then to do some dry runs because the hybrid meeting model is also going to have its own learning curve. And I've heard from some other public agencies who have just started to go in that mode that there are challenges that we're all going to have to learn from and figure out how to overcome.
When you say hybrid, will the public be able to come, or just you guys will be in person?
The public would be able to come, but the intention is to also allow the public to participate remotely, because probably like you, we've had in many circumstances greater public participation remotely, and we don't want to diminish that by going back to in person. So we're trying to figure out how to integrate the two.
Okay, yeah, I mean, we've been back in person with people calling in, but we haven't had any participation in person. It's only been online as we were there. And sometimes it's better. There's some things that are better and some things that are harder, right? It's very often hard to hear the speaker on the phone, and public comment, you're like, what? But yeah, it'll be interesting transition.
Yeah. Well, great. So then our next meeting would be in August. Do we have a date, Ms. Gaines?
I try not to speak to these things without verifying with my calendar. So the third Thursday in August is August 19th.
Great. Good. And so I hope everyone is able to have some good vacation time, and we'll all come back somewhat rejuvenated and raring to go. I know that Shaunak got a jump on it with a half marathon. He's outrunning the rest of us in that regard. So, yeah. As John Madden used to say, I ran mine yesterday all by myself. You know.
I did it before work yesterday, and then I had a full day of lawyering. So Pat called me or texted me late at night by 7, and I was already asleep.
Yeah, I don't like the crowds when I run mine. All right. Well, great. Looking forward to seeing you all in August and perhaps in real person.
Yeah. All right.
right.
Well, thanks
Take
so
care.
much.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.